He is one of the three founding fathers of Pixar animation. However, his idea about having technology to animate movies was rejected by Disney twice in the past. Against all the odds, he realized his dream of becoming a digital animator. Are you ready to meet him and listen to his priceless advice? Let's find out more in the book Creativity Inc. Overcoming the Unseen Forces That Stand in the Way of True Inspiration. Hello, I'm Đoàn Linh and welcome to my book review. Ed Catmull is the co-founder of Pixar Studio. He was also the president of Pixar Animation Studio and Walt Disney Animation Studios. He received his PhD in computer science from the University of Utah. Ed is also the winner of an Academy of Motion Pictures Art and Science Art for his lifetime accomplishment in the field of computer graphics. The book was co-written by Amy Wallace. She served as an editor-at-large at the Los Angeles Times Magazine. She splits her time between magazines and books. As a young man, Ed Catmull had a dream: to make the world's first computer-animated movie. He nurtured that dream first as a PhD student at the University of Utah, where many computer science pioneers got their start. And then he forged an early partnership with George Lucas. Yes, you heard it right, the father of Star Wars, that led indirectly to his founding Pixar with Steve Jobs and John Lasseter in 1986. 9 years later, and against all the odds, Toy Story was released, changing the animation world forever. Since then, Pixar has dominated the world of animation, producing beloved films such as Monster Inc., Finding Nemo, The Incredibles, and my favorite, Up. The joyness of the storytelling, the inventive plots, and the emotional authenticity. In some way, Pixar movies are an object lesson in what creativity really is. Creativity is essentially a manual book on how to build a creative culture told through the lens of Ed's experience at Pixar. The book is filled with rich story ranging from how Toy Story was created, to what working with Steve Jobs was like, to how Pixar almost went bankrupt after George Lucas tried to sell the studio. This book was recommended to me by a friend who is studying business administration at NEU, and he has recommended this book by his professor. Even though business is not my major, I'm very bad at math though, but I do hope that one day I could get a bachelor's degree in other fields besides English teaching education. And my friend's major sounds pretty promising. When I look it up, it's like love at first sight. The color, the design with the book were very eye-catching. I know a lot of people say we shouldn't judge a book by its cover, but for a lazy reader like me, a stunning book cover definitely counts. And what I regret is that only when I finished half of the book did I realize that the book cover was actually a metaphor. And of course I noticed that on my own. So the book, it's mainly about the story of Pixar and its founders and how they managed to establish Pixar as a thriving business. So basically it's about management. On the front cover, we see the image of Buzz Lightyear conducting an orchestra. It represents Catmull as one of the many leaders within Pixar's wall, which have directed and shaped the company into what it is today. Part 1 of the book seems to be the most fascinating and appealing. It also acts as the base of the story, which helps the reader to identify the book's direction of approach easier. Ed Catmull begins his book by talking about how hierarchy means nothing, especially when it comes to creativity, which was pretty straightforward. I found his wording a little bit mechanical and is a bit difficult to catch its idea. However, this turned out to be the thing I really like about this book later on. The thing is, Ed's always symbolizing and visualizing his point in the book, which was amazing, and it really fits him since he is a senior animator. One example for this is when he talked about the nature of management, and to support his point, Ed brought up an image of an oak tree. Imagine you are trying to solve the problem, and an oak tree represents that problem. So in order to solve the problem, you must cut down the oak tree, right? But should I remind you that oak trees also produce oak nuts, and these oak nuts tend to fall down around the oak tree. So even when you have cut down the tree, the offspring problems that are still lying there waiting for you to handle. So, Finding a solution is a multi-step which requires great management skill, and disentangling these newborn problems is definitely not as easy as correcting the original error. Notably, it had taken Catmull 20 years from the time he first crystallized his goal to make a computer-animated film to successfully debut of Toy Story. Pixar's early struggles forged its identity and also gave Catmull his new calling, to learn what it takes to build a lasting creative culture and build Pixar to endure and outlive the forces that have brought down other great companies in the field. Part 2 and Part 3 of the book is the foundations and the barriers to creativity, where the emphasis was after Pixar enjoyed their success with Toy Story. Ed also shared with us how they were able to sustain the growth and also point out the mistakes Pixar had made. Failure is inevitable. It happens to everyone. One of Ed's core management's beliefs is that if you don't try to uncover what is unseen and understand its nature, you will be ill prepared to lead. Yet, we naturally avoid candor, failure, and alteration, and yet most of us are uncomfortable to embark on a process without knowing the answer. Another thing I learned from this part is Ed's perspective on people and ideas and the correlation between those two. One of the main points of the book is that incredible teams are much better than singularly creative ideas. Even talented people can turn a general idea into a more creative one. If you give a good idea to a mediocre team, they will not know what to do with that idea or, in worst cases, screw it up. But when you give a mediocre idea to a brilliant team, they will either fix it or throw it away and come up with something even better. So you see, getting the right people and the right chemistry is very important, and it's more important than getting the right idea. The right people here can also be the ones who are smarter and more creative than the leaders. So don't hesitate to employ these people into your team. As a team leader, you need to put away your own insecurities and always appreciate smarter candidates. Leadership is about making your best guess and hurrying up about it so that if it's wrong, there is still time to change. And of course, critical individuals in the team will give you a firm hand to accelerate this process. Part number 4 is when Pixar merged with Disney. When Pixar was sold to Disney in 2006, Catmull reassured his colleague that Pixar would keep operating as usual, but he also admitted that it was the dumbest thing ever. As the organization was growing, it became clear that some features of its original culture need to be reviewed or even thrown away. It is the only way to grow even more. Success persuades us that we are on the right track, but we must realize that we cannot understand all aspects of complicated settings and instead concentrate on ways for merging multiple points of view that will lead to success. This is my favorite part of the book, the afterwords. And afterwards is dedicated to Steve Jobs and the personal experience that Catmull had with him. He gives a picture somewhat different from that of other books that focus more on the outsides of Jobs' mastermind. For him, Steve has been a mentor and a partner, and above all, a person that evolved during the years. Here's a fun clip of Ed talking about his friend Steve, so you can imagine what working with Steve was like.
But I did ask Steve to begin with. I said, so what happens or how do you work if somebody doesn't agree with you? And he said, well, I just explain it to them until they understand. So I go back to my colleagues and explain this, and they all have this nervous laugh.
I love that the book didn't just focus on Ed's journey by telling how hard it was, listing all those difficulties that he had encountered. That's no more than a basic memoir if he followed that way. Ed made it different. It's based on Ed's life, and his journey is the foundation for him to bring all the advice and lessons he had learned throughout that journey. From a kid who was obsessed with Walt Disney and his magic animation to the next Disney Animation Studio president. Moreover, it sounds more interesting and exciting for me when you read the book to to learn the tactics on how to successfully manage your team. But at the same time, you discover the history of the studio behind those amazing animation movies you have watched since you were a child. The biggest objection that I can envision is that many would say, but our business is different. Our model is nothing like Ed, so it's impossible to adapt his idea into my workplace. But to me, every organization needs creativity to sustain. More or less, you'll learn something from it. In conclusion, I agree that this book is a must-read for anyone who wants to work in the environment that fosters creativity and problem-solving. Ed's belief that good leadership can help creative people stay on the path to excellence no matter what business they are in. So, what about you? Are you ready to build your own creativity ink?